Hello and welcome to this short video which will show you how to create your year groups in Connect Data. Now before we get going, the really important thing is that your organisation has an active Connect account. So if you're not sure or you need an activation code, then please do get in touch with us. Your personal account with your organisation will also need upload permissions. So we're going to be clicking on this Manage Data button, and that will take us into Connect Data, which is our data entry area. And if you can't see this Manage Data button when you log in, then that means that you don't have upload permissions. So if you can't see that and you do need to be uploading data, then you'll need to get in touch with one of your Connect administrators for your organisation, and they will be able to add the appropriate permissions for you. Okay, so to get going with the data upload for your year groups, I'm going to click on this Manage Data button, and this takes me into Connect Data. Now we come straight to this cohort screen, and as you can see, for my 2017-18 year, I have data for my 80 Year 13 students and my 90 Year 12 students. I also have their Priortainment in here, and we have subjects in here as well. Now as yet, I haven't actually imported any data for my 2018-19 students, so today I'm going to be going through creating my, my Year 13 year group for 2018-19. Now I'm going to be importing my Year 13, so Key Stage 5 students today, but it's a very similar process for Key Stage 4 students as well, and where the process does differ I will point that out, and you will also receive guidance within the system. So we can begin adding our year group by clicking on this plus year group here, or by clicking on Add Year Group in this Quick Actions toolbar up in the top right hand corner of the screen. So if I click on Add Year Group, I was in the 18-19 academic year, so it has selected that. It then asks me to select the year group for my students. So I'm importing my Year 13s today, so I'm going to select Year 13. And it gives me a prompt to say that this is going to import data for my Year 13 students in 2018-19. So now I can click Next, and I'm taken to a screen where I get some information on preparing my data. Now we do have a SIMS report definition, which you can download, import into SIMS and then run within SIMS. Now that will extract an Excel file which you will need to save locally, and then you can import. Alternatively, if you don't use SIMS, we do have an Excel template, and that will give you the information that we need, and we also have a little bit of wording around this as well. Now you don't need to worry about the column headings in your data. We'll come on to that when we do column mapping, so you can import from either a CSV or an Excel file, and yep, columns can be in any order with column headers with any name. We will specify that later on in the import. So I have run my SIMS report definition, and this is the output from that. I have my admission number here, which is going to be what I use for student ID, and that's really crucial. So throughout the imports, you will need to make sure that your student ID is consistent for your students, because that is how the software is going to match the data. So between these different imports that I'll be going through in this video, you'll notice that I always make sure to maintain the student ID. So I've got my data prepared, so I can click Next, and we get to this import data step in the wizard. So what I'm going to do, I could drag and drop this file in. I'm actually going to copy and paste, so if I use Control A to highlight everything, Control C to copy, and then I can click and press Control V. And that tells me that I've imported 12 columns and 91 rows. If that wasn't right, I could clear data and import again, but I'm going to click Next, and this takes me to my column mapping. So this step within the wizard is sort of the bit that means that we don't need your import files to have specific names for the column headers, you know, and the columns don't need to be in a specific order. So the admission number here in my file has actually mapped automatically to student ID, as has surname and forename. But UPN, now for my Key Stage 5 students, I can actually skip that, but that's really important for your Key Stage 4. So if you are importing Key Stage 4 students, then please do map the UPN. For now, I'm just going to click skip because I don't need that for these students. Now our SIMS report definition will pull out 3 measures of disadvantage: the pupil premium indicator, Ever in Care, and FSM Ever 6. Now I would say that the vast majority of our clients, particularly at Key Stage 4, will use FSM Ever 6 for disadvantage. But you could use one of these two, or use your own definition if that's more helpful. So I'm going to use FSM Ever 6 today, so I'm going to skip these 2 columns. We've already specified that these are Year 13 students, so again I'm going to skip this. Now the rest of my columns have been mapped, but if for instance I needed to map tutor group, I could click on Edit, and it would bring up this drop-down list, and I could select tutor group. Also, if you have any custom columns that you want to import, then you can actually just say create new custom column and name your custom column. I will just remap that to date of birth. There we go. And now I've got 8 columns mapped. 4 columns have been skipped, but crucially I've got 0 unmapped, so now I can click Next. So this takes me to the Fix Errors step of this wizard. Now I've got a few things that have come up as errors, things that I need to address. We've got some missing values in our disadvantage column. So I've got the students' names here and their student ID if I need to go and look up anything. And while you're fixing your errors, or whenever you're importing data, you can always click Save and Close. If you need to go away, look anything up, or you just need to sort of break off from the import, you can always click Save and Close and it will keep your progress. So in order to fill this in for these students, I could just remove these values, but I'm going to map this to No. Now these errors, because it is a categorical value, so disadvantage in our categories can either be yes or no, that is giving me the drop down options, and then this goes for resolved, and they're all green. For things such as tutor group, so missing values for tutor group, I don't get a drop down for this. This is a free text box, so I can type in whatever tutor groups I like in here, and remember to save when you have made your edits. Now these ethnicity errors, these are unrecognized values. So instead of it just being a blank space within my import, this is actually a value that was in my import that the software hasn't been able to recognize. So that is a critical error because it's actually going to sort of prevent me from moving forwards and using that information that was in my file. So this ethnicity category that hasn't been recognized, if I click the drop down, then I will be able to select the appropriate option from here. And again, then that goes green, everything's resolved, and now I can click next. So this will now give me a quick summary of the data that I've just imported. It's generally very helpful to check. You've got your 90 students up here, and if there's anything particular you want to have a look at, then you can do. So if I click finish, I'm happy with my import, so I'm just going to click finish. Then you can see now I've got my year 13 and my 90 students here. And now I'm able to actually add data for this prior attainment, whereas it was blank before. I can't add any teaching data or personalized targets as yet. That's waiting on the prior attainment. Now the prior attainment will sort of, you can't add any data before you add prior attainment, so you can't add monitoring data, you can't add teaching data, personalized targets or exam results before you've actually completed this prior attainment, or at least begun to add it for some of your students. And that is because ALPS is a value add system. So without the prior attainment, we actually can't calculate any of our measures. So it's a really crucial part of your upload. Again, this is a upload that is done through a wizard. So if I click on this Add Data, it doesn't ask me to select the year because I have entered the wizard from this year 13 line on the year group summary bar. But I do have two options. I can either use scores that I have calculated myself, or I can use the ALPS calculator. It's also worth saying that this is another bit that will differ depending on your key stage. So key stage 4 for England, this is going to be a key stage 2 score calculator. And for Welsh schools, it will be your Welsh National Test scores from year 8. Our prior attainment resources actually have a lot more information on that, and there's a video and an article on your prior attainment, so I'd encourage you to have a look at that if you're not doing a Key Stage 5 import. So I have used the ALPS calculator, and that has generated an XML file that I'm going to import. So if I click next, here it gives me the calculator download. So I have actually downloaded the calculator, used the tool to extract my students' GCSE scores, and when I click next, I can import my XML file. So I have saved my XML file to my desktop, so I'm just going to drag and drop that in, and that has successfully imported. So if I click next, then it begins processing the scores. So it has now it has calculated my scores. You can see these are my new values here for my students. The student IDs, again, this sort of crucial value on the left-hand side here, and it's pulled through the forename and the surname from my year group import, so the import that we just completed. If I click Finish, and you can see now this section of the year group summary bar is also populated. So now I can actually move on to teaching data and add personalized targets. and I could at this point also move on to adding my exam results or adding a monitoring point if, for instance, I didn't want to use teaching data. If I wasn't interested in teaching data analysis, or if for instance, if you're a smaller sixth form and you only have one class per subject, then you may well not need to import that data. But I'm going to show you this import. So you can click on Add Data to launch the Teaching Data Wizard. And again, we get this sort of, by now, a bit familiar format. So you've got your prepare data, import data, then you map your columns of your spreadsheet, and then you have your sort of remove errors sections of the wizards. So again, I just get a little prompt for the students that I'm adding the data for. Again, we have the report definitions to help you extract data from SIMS, and if you don't use SIMS, then again we have an example spreadsheet for you. So if I click Next, I can import my file. So I've saved my teaching sets again to my desktop, so I'll just drag and drop that in. We can see here I've got my file with all my teaching sets, and if I click Next, then again I come to this column mapping. Now within this import there's quite a lot more that you can skip. Again, I can skip the UPN because I don't need it for my Key Stage 5 students. I can actually skip the student's surname and the forename because the software is going to use the student ID to actually match our teaching set and subject entries to the student information that we previously imported, all based on the student ID. So it is really important to have those consistent between your imports. Year. Now I can map that to study year. So if any of your year 13s, for instance, have started a new course, they're being taught with year 12s, then their subject entry, it may be more appropriate to have year 12 for that, and your colleagues can use that to filter and interactive. Start date and end date I can skip, and then I can click Next. Now I've got a few subjects here that I haven't mapped. The ones in orange indicate subjects that the software hasn't recognised. I have done quite a bit of subject mapping already just to set this up. So you can see this little wand here indicates that this has actually been recognised from my saved subject mappings from mappings that I've done previously. So I can map my subjects by clicking into the ALP subjects and typing and searching for business. Now this still gives me a pretty big list, so if I click on A, then that only brings up the A levels with containing business. So click on that and that maps, and I get a little person icon saying it was mapped by me. Do the same for chemistry and French. Hair and beauty I'm going to remove. We don't actually have a benchmark for that subject, so I'm going to remove it from my analysis. So now that says unmapped and ignored. For history, again, just type that in and click on history. Our teaching sets report definition for SIMS will pull out your timetable. So you can sometimes get subjects pulling through that are sort of recreation or personal study or tutor groups, that sort of thing, simply because it pulls from your timetable. So if you do have any subjects like this that you don't want to include, you can again just use this little bin icon and it will ignore them. If I wanted to remap any of these, then I can click this pencil icon and it will again bring up the subject mapper for me, so I can change that. If, for instance, I didn't want it to be fine art, if in fact it should be art craft, then I can change that mapping. So once I'm happy with all of my subject mappings, I can click Next. Now I have a few duplicate values. Now because we do sort of use the student IDs to match, you can't have any duplicate values for the same subject and ID, not for the teaching sets. So if you do have any duplicates, then you will need to remove them. So you can see the teaching sets here, the student IDs and their subjects, and if I remove this, then you can see it resolves this row. Remove that one, and that one, and then I have the teaching sets that I want, and I've removed the teaching sets that I don't want. So if I click Next, then again, so similarly to the student information import to create our year group initially, missing values will also flag as errors. Now this isn't necessarily a problem. This is just advising me that my physics subject doesn't have a teacher. That could be correct. You can always add the teacher in. However, if you remove remaining values from import, then that just means that you don't import a teacher in association with that subject, which is not necessarily a critical error. It's not necessarily important. If you don't want to import a teacher, that's not a problem at all. It will still import this physics subject. There will just be no teacher associated with that teaching set. So if I click Next, you'll be able to see that. So again, I've got these 366 records that have been added to my 2018-19 Year 13. I can go down, have a quick check of this. These student names are greyed out because they've actually been pulled through from the year group import. So based on the student ID, these names have been pulled through. And if we scroll down and just have a quick look at physics, there we can see we've still got the teaching set, still got the entries here, just no teacher. So if I click Finish, then you can see I've imported my 17 subjects in my teaching data here, and my year group summary bar is pretty complete now. I could go away and import exam results. If I do need to make any edits to this cohort, then I can do. You can make edits by clicking on the year group, and this will take you into this students page. So on the left hand side we are in the cohorts page, seeing this year group summary bar. If you come into the students page, then you can view your list of students. If you click the little pencil next to any of them, then you can go in, view and edit their subjects and grades if you come up to this subject information section, or any of their student information, including their average GCSE score.